or not last week, but 2 weeks ago, we I believe we started in verse 12. Um, Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. Um, so what it when we but if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him from my altar that he may die. So what we covered here, so these passages are discussing instances of one man killing another. And this first one, where it says, whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death, what that's covering is the idea of intent, right? So it says, whoever strikes a man so that he dies. That's to say, whoever strikes a man and who he planned for this. It was his desire to kill him. He planned to kill him by striking him, right? If a person with forethought and willful behavior and intention kills someone, then the result is that they shall be killed, right? So we talked. I think this led into quite the discussion about the death penalty, because there's always a lot of debate in our culture about whether the death penalty is a good idea, whether it is moral, right? There's a big discussion about whether people think it's moral, and I can understand both arguments of it. I think there's something to be said, that a lot of people who don't like the death penalty don't like it for one because they feel like the justice system may be flawed. Two, there's a sense of compassion where they want everyone to have a chance at redemption in life. But the Bible doesn't seem to be against at least the principle of the death penalty, right? Because right here, it's very cut and dry. If someone intentionally killed another person, then they are to be killed. That's the law. This is a civil law, not a moral law. So this is how the civil judge is to carry this out. If it's proved that this person killed someone intentionally, then they themselves will be put to death. Now, and our culture tends to be pretty soft on this, depending on who you talk to in our culture. But God takes life very, very seriously. God places the highest value on life because man was created to be in his image, right? And so for a person to get to the place where he has so little value for another person's life that he intentionally ends that life, then that person is to be judged accordingly. Now, whether we like that or not is not, the Bible doesn't really concern itself with. Because once again, the Bible's not telling us on a moral level that this is what we should or shouldn't do. The Lord is setting out a civil code for the nation of Israel to follow. Now, our nation deals with it in a slightly more different manner, certainly a less efficient manner. It's a state by state, for the most part, decision. So depending on what state you're in, they will or will not have the death penalty available. And the states that do, however, the process is very drawn out, right? So it can take years before a person's case gets tried. And then if they're convicted and sentenced to death, then they can sit on death row for 15, 20 years. And during that time, they can constantly appeal their case, right? And so it costs millions of dollars to keep to sentence a person to death. And it takes a very long time. And sometimes the person's actually innocent, right? And so our system is very, I think there's a very good argument to say that our practice of the death penalty is very flawed and needs to be corrected. But I don't think the Bible would argue against the principle of a death penalty, and so that's kind of where that discussion ends.
That was the way of life. That's how they did it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's a little bit different. I think we struggle with. We want to be 100% sure that man was guilty,
Right.
Because we don't want. I think they think, we don't want God coming back at us if we accidentally.
Sure.
But that's not.
And there's something to be said to be very slow to judge, right?
Yes.
And the American system is kind of designed to be slow in its judgment, which is a good thing, I think, in some regard.
Yes.
And the American system, a jury is only supposed to convict a person if they are beyond a shadow of the doubt. I think is the phrase, right? If there is any doubt of their guilt, then you can't convict them. And I believe that's the way it's supposed. That's the sense that it's supposed to have. Now the Bible doesn't go into great detail here about the acceptable evidence or how to prove it, and we'll find that the system does get corrupted. The system does get corrupted. I mean, you can look at Jesus's case, right? The Jesus was tried and sentenced to death based on lies, right? It makes it clear that they brought false witnesses who claimed they heard him say certain things which he didn't actually say. And based on that, he was sentenced to death. So the system gets corrupted, and that's something that people need to realize, is that no matter what system, no matter how good the system, no matter how perfect its origin, if it's run by people, it will get corrupted, right? And so we shouldn't be surprised when we find corruption in the systems that we establish or that we run, right? So anywho, that's kind of getting away from our point here, but so the Bible has a practice of a death penalty, but and it, which is a bit more streamlined, if you will, than our own. But I think one thing to take away is that God does seem to support the principle of a death penalty, of a person who takes a life willfully, then their life is to be taken as well, at least according to the law he gives here. Now, but then he gives another case, right? But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand. Now that's an old idiom, Hebrew idiom, to express that the death was accidental, that it was a circumstance that was not planned or intended, right? And so it would say God let him fall into his hand, basically fate. It kind of happened without anyone planning on it happening, right? So if he did not lie in wait for him, did not plan for it, did not, basically here's a difference between first and second degree murder, right? Or third degree murder or manslaughter, right? So first degree murder in our system is that you planned it beforehand and then you carried it out. That's first degree murder. Second degree murder is you killed someone in the heat of passion, I think is what they call it. It's in the moment and you didn't plan on it, but you got so angry in the moment, or you got so worked up in the situation that you killed the person, but there was no prior planning to that. That's second degree murder. Now that, I think the first and second degree murder, fall under our first verse there. Whoever strikes a man so that he dies, right? That he dies. So he strikes him with the intention of killing him. So I think that's first and second degree murder. In both of those cases, God prescribes the death penalty to the Israelites. But in this other case, you have third degree murder or manslaughter, where it's accidental or through negligence, or although we'll get into situations of negligence today in our discussion, but in other situations where there was no intention of killing, right? So in that case, he says, I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. And I think they'll end up called cities of refuge.
If you attack me,
Mm-hmm.
and we're fighting,
Mm-hmm.
and I kill you, is different. That's
Well, that would depend, right? That would depend on, was it your intention to kill the person or not?
no. I mean, if I'm going to my car and someone jumps on me and attacks me and we're fighting and I
Hmm.
strike him and he dies.
Yeah, that would be this right here.
Oh, would it?
Hmm. Yep. So so the idea is that you did not
Oh,
intend, you did not plan on killing him, you did not lie in wait to kill this person.
right.
You guys ended up in a
Oh, I see.
struggle, and the other person died, but not by your intention,
Right.
right?
Okay.
And so if
Initially,
that's
right.
the case, then you have to go find this place of refuge, right? Because the family of that person, it's expected that the family of that person will want to avenge their death, right? Like many families would. And so to avoid further bloodshed, because if they come and kill you, then your family will want to avenge you, and they'll come kill them, and then you have this big blood feud starting, right? And so to avoid that, God says, "I'm going to establish this place for you to flee, so that, and this place is understood that there's no bloodshed here, there's no one killed here. You go there, you're protected, so that the judges can work out the case,
Okay. Okay.
right? You go there, and then you appeal to the judges, and then they hear you out, and they hear out whatever other thing, and then they decide, right? Um, but then we have this other case. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, right? You shall take him from my altar that he may die. Essentially, this is a person who purposefully killed someone, but then ran to the city of refuge and pretended
Oh,
that it was an accident or something. He's trying to be cunning. He's trying to get around it.
yeah.
And God says, "Look, if it comes out that's not the case,
Burn down.
you take him away from my altar and you kill him." Right. So that's a situation for a death penalty that we talked about. Then we hit this lovely verse: "Whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death." Now, this is not just striking with intention to kill. This is
Period.
just striking, just to strike. You do that, you hit your father or mother, you are put to death. Now, this seems very, in our culture, this would not be accepted, right? And once again, this is civil law, not a moral law, right? And so this is not the Bible prescribing that all peoples follow this
Right.
behavior, right? But there's when we see something like this and we take it less seriously than the Bible does, and so we're like, wow, that seems like an extreme reaction. What we should be actually thinking to ourselves is, hey, maybe I'm not taking this seriously enough, right? Because for us, we're like, so your kid hit you, get over it, right? Maybe that's not a great thing, but that they don't deserve to die for it. That's how most people would react in our culture. But maybe we're the ones who have the wrong perspective about this, not the Bible. That might just be the case, right? Maybe we don't take honoring your father and mother seriously enough. Okay.
Hit that. I go to that statement. I
Right.
think that's it.
So I think if we think this is an overreaction, maybe, but I think we should probably be open to the thought that maybe we don't take it seriously enough. Because what is a father or a mother? What are a person's parents? A person's parents, and we talked about this at length, is parents are the fundamental exposure and the fundamental authority in any person's life. The first authority that any child is exposed to and has to learn to submit to are their parents. And if a child will not honor and respect the authority of their parents, then they're not going to honor and respect the authority that they encounter when they go to school
Amen.
or to church or whatever. And then if they don't learn to respect and honor authority from their parents or of their parents or at school, then they're not going, when they get older, they won't respect the authority of the nation, of the government. And so then those people tend to become criminals, very serious criminals, and tend to be a plague on the state and on society. Um, and so, from the Bible's perspective, or from this perspective, in this culture, if you can't honor the fundamental authority, And if you've gone so far in your dishonor of that authority that you actually strike it, then there's no then you are more of a danger to society. And you're such a danger to society that you need to be removed from it permanently. Because we can look at this and say, well, that's not that big a deal. But the path down which someone has gone to get to this point of striking their parents is so far, in the Bible's perspective, that they need to be removed. Now, once again, whether you agree with that or not is one thing. And we're going to talk about this a lot today, of how you should expect to disagree with the Bible sometimes.
Oh,
You
you
should
actually disagree?
you should expect to disagree with the Bible, understanding that when you do, you're the one that's wrong,
Oh, I
not the
know.
Bible.
That's why I said, you didn't get me there.
but but if we always agreed with the Bible, then either we're not reading it correctly, or we're imposing our own interpretation on it, or we're lying. Because if the Bible is real, then we should expect to disagree with it, and we'll talk more about that in a little while, because we have some very disagreeable verses coming up.
Oh,
So then we have this next passage we talked about: whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. This is essentially kidnapping and forced enslavement, basically, right? So anybody who kidnaps someone else, death penalty. And anybody who is found in possession of a kidnapped person, death penalty, right? Um, and notice all these things which bear. We'll talk about that in a minute.
it's hard not to.
Yeah, and honestly, kidnapping someone is almost like killing them. It's almost like killing them. Because what you've done, if you forcibly take someone from their parents or from their life or whatever, and you remove them, they've lost that life. They've lost that freedom unwillingly, right?
Yes.
Involuntarily. And so, in a sense, you've killed them. They're still alive, but they've lost that life, right? And then, and so this still goes back to the matter of the supreme value of a person, of an individual, that divine essence of a person that needs to be respected in its most fundamental sense. So there's a death penalty there, and then we go on to this other one, which seems like it ought to be paired with that other verse where it says, "Whoever curses his father or mother shall be put to death." Now, this one where it seems even more like a reaction or overreaction, right? That's tough, right? Um, Now, understand that this is more than just yelling at them. To curse them means to publicly disgrace them. You are publicly disgracing them. Um, Now, this culture is what's called an rolls by with an honor shame system. So our culture doesn't have an honor shame system. Um,
Right.
we don't.
It's
So
non-existent.
but for them, honor and shame are the fundamental qualities of life, right? If you're shamed in society, that's like the end of all things for you, basically. And honor is everything. That's still the way it is today, right? Um,
Lord Jesus.
and people will do, and so for you to go and publicly shame your parents, um, is so egregious for this culture that the death penalty is the result. It's once again, it seems like an overreaction to us, but that's because our value system is different,
Oh, God.
right?
Yes.
We don't value our honor
We don't value
or our parents as highly as the culture did then. And so when we say things like, well, that seems like an overreaction, it seems like it to you because you don't value that as much. Because what you value is different. You value this less. And maybe this is an overreaction, but also maybe you should value this more. Right? Now, notice the Bible doesn't say unless they deserve it. Whoever curses his father or mother shall be put to death unless they deserved it, right? Because for you to say, well, they deserved it, you're putting yourself in place of their judge, right? And that's not your place, right? Um, and that's a hard standard. But also notice the Bible never commands a child to love their parents. The Bible only commands a child to honor their parents.
I was getting emotional for this because I've experienced this.
Yeah.
I get it.
It doesn't command the child to like their parents. It commands the child to to honor their parents. Now Jesus commands us to love all people and even to love our enemies. That's another matter. But when you're talking about a child's responsibility to their parents, it's primarily to honor them. Right? Now, honoring your parent can look like a lot of different things. And sometimes the best way to honor your parent is to just keep your distance. Sometimes that's the best way you can honor your parents. But it is never correct to curse your father or mother. So we talked about that a little bit. That's a tough one. And then lastly, let's see. I think we talked about these last two verses, or is it these last three? Yeah, these last two. When men quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or his fist, and the man does not die, but takes to his bed, then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear. In other words, he won't be killed, right? Only he shall pay for the loss of his time and shall have him thoroughly healed. So basically, if two men are fighting, and someone gets seriously injured in that fight, no one tried to kill anybody. There was no intention of killing, but they were fighting, and as happens, someone got hurt badly enough that it puts him out of being able to work for a time, right? Then the person who injured him, they won't be liable as far as like a death penalty or anything or a legal fine like that. Only they shall compensate the injured person for their loss of time. So whatever amount is appropriate that you maybe would have made if you had been working, then I'll compensate you for that amount of time, right? Because it's my fault that I've put you into this situation where you're unable to work. And I have to pay the medical bills, right? So I have to make sure that you get the medical treatment you need and that you're compensated for the time lost as a result of the injury, which seems very reasonable, right? The Bible seems to be perfectly fine with people fighting it out so long as they don't kill each other. I mean, it's... And I got news for you. There are some states in America where what's called mutual combat is allowable. The police won't stop it. So long as nobody tries to kill anybody. If two people they have a mutual agreement that they're going to fight, the police will allow it to happen. I think it's an interesting concept, but
that's in the Viking days. They were very much like that.
You'd like to say it was from the Viking days,
Well,
but we had a president who fought, I can't remember how many duels, 10, 15 duels, Andrew Jackson, and killed people in these duels.
But I mean, the respect. What I'm saying is they would fight it out, the Vikings.
Yeah.
And whoever got the best, you could say.
Yeah.
When they got up, they shook each other's hand and walked off.
Men will still do that.
I mean, because you're right. So that's what I was saying.
Men still do that. Men can fight and then be okay with each other after the fight, and that's how they worked out the problem, right? They beat each other up. We fought it out, and whoever wins or loses, we fought it out. So now
Standard
it's
procedure
yeah,
back in
yeah,
the
yeah.
day, but
Well, it's like you said, it's honoring who won.
But that's a lot of what we talked about last week. Very uncomfortable in some places,
Oh
and some of
yes,
the nitty gritty of legal matters.